A lot of people around Penn State thought this was a great hire to bring Danton Lynn back to Happy Valley. Yet my counterparts out west continue to tell me that this is an overrated move.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is right. It is a Locked On crossover to talk Penn State and UCLA football. My name is Zach Seyko. I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. He is Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, host of Locked On UCLA. And thank you so much for making this crossover episode your first listen or your first watch of the day, as we're going to be breaking down all the offseason moves that have overlapped between the Nittany Lions and the Bruins, outlooks for both the programs. Hey, Penn State had mutual interest with Bob Chesney when he was interviewing around. He was linked to Penn State. UCLA ultimately hires him. What are the biggest obstacles for Chesney in LA? We're going to begin with Danton Lynn, Ikaika Malloe, coming over. Two former UCLA defensive coordinators now at Penn State. One of them's a grad, and they brought some UCLA players with them. So that's what we're going to talk about here to open up the show. But primarily, Zach, is the fact that Mark Culkin at Locked On USC, it was kind of no love lost. It was Lynn can move on. That's okay. We'll be better off anyway. And you yourself, I want to get your perspective, because he really, Danton Lynn in particular, really elevated that UCLA defense in 2023. But you're kind of telling me the same thing. I mean, I'll let you speak for yourself, but you've kind of alluded to the fact that this isn't an elite hire. It's good because Lynn's still unproven.
That's the exact word I'd use, Zach. It would be, he's unproven. At USC, he took over for Grinch, and that was a joke of USC's defense. UCLA's defense prior to Danton Lynn was Azenaro. Azenaro was terrible because that was a long-time Chip buddy. Almost the same thing with Lincoln Riley and Grinch. Then the Bruins went to Bill McGovern. Bill McGovern dealt with cancer and passed away. So it was a little bit of a different situation. The Bruins had improved from year to year, but they were still lacking in defensive intensity. And that's what Danton Lynn brings, intensity. And he brings that out in the linebacking core, on the defensive line. It's just the one problem is, maybe not the problem, UCLA had elite NFL talent. Laiatu Latu, first round pick. You had Gabriel and Grayson Murphy, twins on the UCLA defensive line, undrafted NFL free agents, but still enough to hover around the NFL. Darius Moasau, an NFL draft pick. Kane Medrano, NFL draft pick. Jay Tuia on the D-line, NFL draft pick. Carson Schlesinger wasn't even a starter on that 23 team. Defensive rookie of the year probably in the NFL this year, was a backup at that time. Femi Oladejo was a backup. He was a top tier, one of the top picks in the NFL draft alongside Schlesinger. And some guys who are transferring to Penn State were on that defense as well. But he had elite defensive talent. And the Bruins thrived on turnovers and physicality, some of which is a credit to Danton Lynn. But just the sheer name Laiatu Latu alone accounted for almost, 30 to 40% of UCLA sacks and tackles for loss. In 23, Latu had 13 sacks, 21 and a half tackles for loss by himself. I can't say that's all Danton Lynn, but I can't say it was all not him helping out the growth of Latu.
I mean, I personally, from my perspective, and this is what I've been saying, is Lynn doesn't get a top 3 run defense by accident, right? A top 3 pass rush by accident at UCLA of all places. Is there? Yeah, it takes 2 to tango, right? You need the player personnel to maximize what you're trying to do. You also need a coach that's going to be on board with it, because the pushback that I have from the USC perspective is that, okay, because you say, well, he's not exactly overrated, but I do need to see more. He kind of lucked into a lot of talent at UCLA and then kind of disappointed at USC. They were expecting more from him. Okay, well, Rome wasn't built in one night, and you're going from a bottom 10 defense to somebody that immediately puts you around the top 50. But that second year wasn't that leap. I also want to point out that Lincoln Riley teams have never been good at defense. So I think Danton Lynn joining Penn State is going to, and then in conjunction with Ikaika Malloe, because that's what I want to get your thoughts on too, is Lynn and Malloe together. You get not one, but 2 former play callers. Now, I know Malloe was not nearly as successful as Lynn was at UCLA, But the fact that you have two play callers, two defensive minds like that in the same building, getting to scheme together, in addition to what Penn State was also to hire at their linebackers coach, another former play caller being at Cincinnati. I digress from that, though. The point is here that I think the deck was stacked against Lynn at USC. Well, he had more talent. Surely he should have had a top 10, a top 20 defense. Lincoln Riley's never had that. There's no precedent to expect that. I think with more complementary football and what Matt Campbell's going to do at Penn State in the offense, that Lynn should actually start to settle back in and get Penn State, honestly, in my opinion, with the talent that they have, around the top 30. If I'm being honest, I think that Penn State will have a within the top 30, top 25, really topping out at top 20. A lot of to frame it that way. But how does Malloe factor into all of that as well with what Lynn can do in his first season at Penn
Malloe
State?
actually had a pretty solid run defense in his 2024 season as the defensive play caller. He called the bowl game when UCLA was in the now defunct LA Bowl. He started this 2025 season when things went awry, but Malloe in 24, a little bit of D-line talent. Keanu Williams, before getting hurt, was a part of that D-line talent early in the year. And then you had Kane Madrano and then Femi Oladipo, some guys who are key NFL draftees. And then slowly, Kirsten Schlesinger built up and became a huge factor for UCLA's defense. So some of that linebacking core played a big role in UCLA's success defensively at the end of 24. And once the talent pool left, Isaiah Chisholm and John Vaughns just weren't the same. UCLA looked bad on defense. They looked horrible all the way around in 25. Malloe, passionate. One of the reasons Latu came to UCLA was that relationship with Ikaika Malloe, because Latu started at Washington, had all the injury issues, came to UCLA. So Malloe, D-line coach. What did UCLA thrive with? The D-line in 23 before he became the defensive play caller. Passionate. Great recruiter, great with relationships. From what I was hearing, he was so devastated and distraught that he felt he cost Deshaun Foster his job because of how bad the defense played. Like, he cares. If you go watch some of those play calls or the post-game press conferences, even in 24, when UCLA had some heartbreaking losses, you can see like tears in his eyes. A little different from what Danton Lynn has done at UCLA and USC. He's kind of bounced around, one job, another job, and seemingly he was always destined to probably end up at Penn State with some successful years, and that's how he did it. While Ikaika Malloe is passionate, he was a co-defensive coordinator at Washington, and then moving over to UCLA, I think the relationship with his players is good. That's why you see two defensive linemen going from UCLA to Penn State, guys who have been with the Bruins program for years, somehow getting 30 years of eligibility. I don't know, Seyko, but that's how it works with Taupaki and Keanu Williams in some aspects.
It's how it works nowadays,
it's how it works.
right?
And somehow they're still getting COVID years. I don't even understand it. But I think the D-line will be good. And he must have liked working under Lynn. That has to be a relationship that really thrived in 1 year, because that's when everything clicked. D-line talent, linebacking talent, rushing the passer. Run defense was good for the Bruins for 2 years. What they didn't have in 25, a horrible run defense. They had a horrible run defense, and the Bruins got victimized from it. So together, you have a guy who breeds physicality, disguises his defense, has NFL experience, that's what guys are going to Penn State for, and then you mix in Malloe, solid recruiter, builds relationships, and it's going to get guys to Penn State even beyond what Penn State already provides. Solid atmosphere, tradition, and trying to take the next level under Matt Campbell.
And that's what Bob Chesney is trying to do at UCLA, of course, from, level one, right? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but Bob Chesney's the right guy to lead a program forward that should have sustained success. And it's a reason why he was on Penn State's radar. But what can he do out in Los Angeles? I think it's a questionable fit, but Chesney might be able to overcome some of those LA obstacles. We're going to talk about that next here on this Locked On Crossover. And today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. This is Mazda's moving the game forward for those who show there's more to the score than just what's simply on the screen. And I want to highlight somebody that's not a player, but rather a coach. The guy who stuck around at Penn State, who helped bridge and help that transition from one coach to another, Terry Smith. Terry Smith deserves a ton of credit for keeping Penn State not only in a mode to be competitive, but to set them up for immediate success in the not too distant future, right out of the gate in the Matt Campbell era. If it wasn't for Terry Smith, Penn State, I think, would have more of an uphill battle. And he was able to keep it all together while having Penn State be competitive, winning football games, going on that win streak, and inspiring the players and helping go from one era to the other and setting them up for immediate success. These moments help remind us what it really takes to raise the bar. It's the extra work off the football field, off the basketball court, you name it, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, the I never quit. We put in the same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Mazda, move and be moved. And once again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network out there. If you haven't already, go check out the all new Everydayer Club. What is the Everydayer Club? You get more access to this show. You will get ad-free audio feeds for Locked On Nittany Lions, compatible with Apple, Spotify, and every other major podcasting app as a member of the Everydayer Club. You will also get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. Go to LockedOnNittanyLions.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more and sign up for the all-new Everydayer Club. I think it's a bit of an odd fit. Somebody who's been around the East Coast a lot. He's at James Madison University, and then to pack up and fly 6 hours across the country to Los Angeles. Look, I think Bob Chesney is one of the very few coaches that, from a cultural, geographical standpoint, that he can overcome some of these initial obstacles once he settles in. But Zach, my question to you is, how long is he going to be patient? How long is UCLA going to be patient? Because I don't think anything that happens moving forward is going to be this. And again, this is the 1,000-foot perspective, but my thoughts are that Chesney is a really good coach. I'm concerned that UCLA is going to set him up for failure.
It is incompetence above him that will set him up for failure. Chesney himself, I do not think will fail UCLA. What the Bruins are currently dealing with is they have no idea where they're going to play in 2026. I think it's the Rose Bowl. I can't confirm on their website. It says
I thought it was going to be at SoFi.
I think it's going to be the Rose Bowl for one more year, and then it might eventually be SoFi. Okay. But we really don't know. I mean, it's late enough in the year. I hope it's the Rose Bowl. I always like the Rose Bowl. I'm not a personal fan of SoFi. But then you have Bruins for Life, an NIL organization that was kind of fraudulent heading into this last year. And then everybody, including myself, was bashing Nico with the circus that came around him. And then it just keeps going on and on. UCLA has had two separate national entities write about the Bruins' failures from above prior to the new chancellor coming in, right? UCLA's athletic director got extended in between UCLA's chancellor, which is kind of the same thing as the president.
That was
extended their AD when the interim chancellor was there. So there's all this nonsense. They had a coaching search committee designed to go find a Bob Chesney, and they found their guy. Chesney was the guy they wanted. I had heard from some rumblings that they were looking for a winner. What that meant, I didn't know at the time. If I had kind of connected the dots, Chesney was that guy that's won at every level. So you mix in his movement west. Mm-hmm. He's emphasized guys who succeeded with him at all levels, whether it's D2 to FCS or FBS, like Colin Hitchler at James Madison. And then the rest of the guys he's filled up with West Coast connections to make sure UCLA has a good recruiting status. The Bruins, within the first couple of days, they could go to the local high schools. They went to St. John Bosco. I think they've gone to Mater Dei already. They've already touched in the Trinity League. And if you've heard about the Trinity League, think of some of the biggest quarterbacks, some of the best players in the country have come from Orange County, which is the best high school football you can see across the country. That's right here in SoCal. UCLA has forgotten to go to those places, or the local public schools, which have some once-in-a-generation talents. UCLA had their entire staff there, or close to it, with Bob Chesney. So he gets it. I think there'll be success. It's really whether they'll screw it up above him. UCLA is dealing with this same kind of incompetence with Mick Cronin. He's in the hot seat. The problem is they just extended him 5 years and his buyout's over $22 million. Before Chip Kelly left, he got extended. I was happy about it and then sort of confused once I kind of really dug in and saw, wait a minute, this is not so good. They should fire him. They didn't. They let him walk. Two examples of UCLA failing to move on from coaches or extending them at the wrong time, leading to what could be disaster. UCLA football, 2 years of it, and then UCLA basketball in the midst of what should be a good year is really not doing so well. 12-6 and mediocre in the Big Ten. Forget travel, forget the new conference identity. It's not going to cut it at UCLA, and they're handcuffed despite huge money coming in NIL wise or donation wise. You can't just handcuff yourself and pay an extra $22 million to buy out a coach. That's what they're dealing with. Chesney, though, the right coaching philosophy, the guy who's a culture builder, together, I think that rejuvenates UCLA, and everybody who's a fan of UCLA is excited.
And I think that's why you and I should have had this crossover episode maybe even sooner, right? I feel like there's so much overlap, not only because, okay, Lynn's a former UCLA defensive coordinator, Ikaika Malloe as well, a couple former players from UCLA follow as a result too. It's the overlap and the commonalities between Penn State and UCLA that are basically trying to copy the Indiana formula. Is that you get a culture builder, you get somebody that has won at every level. Okay, well, who has just done that and is succeeding ever more than anybody could have thought of at Indiana? Curt Cignetti. Well, what do Bob Chesney and Curt Cignetti have in common? They both won pretty consistently over at James Madison. The same idea, Penn State. Now, Matt Campbell didn't do the exact same formula of, hey, you succeed at some lower levels of football, you get to James Madison, you win there, then you land the Power 4 job, which Bob Chesney basically followed almost to a T. He's also, a bit younger here. I mean, Matt Campbell and Bob Chesney are relatively the same age to Cignetti, but, Campbell, okay, punching above his weight class in the Big 12, never won a title or anything, but still showed consistency at a school that in this era of NIL and the transfer portal, honestly, is very difficult to do. And I think that was because everything that I had heard about Bob Chesney and him being linked to Penn State and why it took so long to materialize with UCLA is because that Penn State essentially had the first right to refuse. I mean, he is a Pennsylvania guy after all. He's a Cold Belt guy. That's where he grew up in the state of central Pennsylvania. He seemed like he'd be a perfect fit, but inexperience. And that's what led Penn State back to Matt Campbell when everybody knew that, there's mutual interest here. Chesney, though, he needs this opportunity at UCLA to kind of prove and say, okay. And I think that's what, hey, Curt Cignetti did he have enough experience isn't the right word there because Curt Cignetti is
he had the experience. He was under Nick Saban for a short time, went to the FCS level because he was at Elon,
he's been
went to
around
James
forever.
Madison, bounced around, even though he's older. So it seemed like an interesting pivot at the time. And now he's won at Indiana. The difference between what UCLA and what Indiana provided, Indiana has proven they can keep Cignetti, at least for the first couple of years, enough for him to win a championship at Indiana, which is the best they can do. If Chesney stays at UCLA, that would be successful. They just have to prove at the top they can do it. That if he succeeds, they can keep him and not let him float back east, not let him float somewhere else too. What Danton Lynn did to UCLA, 1 year at UCLA, floated to USC. All right, that's not what Chesney's going to do.
Like that.
He wants to be the school. He gets it, and I think he cares a little bit more about loyalty. Is my understanding. So I don't think he's using this as a stepping stone. But you have to prove you're willing to put in the money and the resources. Indiana kind of was shocked, like, wow, this actually happened. And now the resources are coming in, right? Mark Cuban's finally giving to Indiana. Isn't that crazy that he's been a long-time alum and now it's finally getting back?
Winning cures a lot of things. It fixes a lot of problems.
Yeah, it shines a light on the right things that they never had in football before. UCLA is a much better program ever than Indiana in football. Yet who's won a championship recently? Indiana. But UCLA, I'm not going to say they're right behind them, but the right steps can put them in the national spotlight that they've just been in the wrong side for a very long time.
Both Penn State and UCLA, I can say this with 100% confidence, are trying to copy and paste the Curt Cignetti model. Will it work out? Well, that's what we're going to discuss in segment 3. Outlook for both programs, for Matt Campbell, for Bob Chesney, and the optimism for the next 5 years on both sides. That's coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. This episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever just to hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Now, instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect with them online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms and work to get you every single deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling all of it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150. That's right, $150 all in if a TurboTax expert did not file for you last year. All you got to do is file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. I think that Penn State is in more of a win now mode than UCLA, but with the transfer portal, California has recruits up and down the state, right? You just have to do some recruiting. You don't have to do a lot. You don't have to out recruit USC. You need to do some. It's the leftover talent that leaves the state. So I think that UCLA can absolutely be a factor, and it's still Los Angeles. It's still UCLA's in the Big Ten. The setup is there. It's what we discussed in segment 2 here, Zach, is that UCLA is its own biggest enemy. So I think in due time, if UCLA, hey, let's keep Bob Chesney happy. I agree with you. Chesney is not looking to use this job as a stepping stone. I think he wants this to be home. I think he wants to build a foundation there, but only if UCLA is going to reciprocate. And if they don't, then you have to worry about that in 3-4 years' time. Okay, because other schools are going to come calling. Absolutely. If he goes 7-5, again, if you're punching above the weight class consistently in the Big Ten at a school like UCLA, you will see other programs that if they lose a head coach or they fire somebody and they get desperate to make a splash, Bob Chesney is going to look very appealing. When it comes to Matt Campbell and Penn State, they can win now because of the injection of Iowa State players into Happy Valley, right? You basically almost copy and paste, not entirely there, right? I joke about that and stuff, but you brought talented players. You didn't bring everybody. You didn't literally copy and paste Iowa State at Penn State, but you brought over this significant key contributors, a significant portion of those guys to complement what you had already retained. So Matt Campbell in the short term, I think is going to be obviously quicker to success than UCLA, but UCLA's goals are certainly attainable. It's just about making sure that Bob Chesney doesn't get poached by somebody else after he has a year or two of success sooner rather than later.
That's certainly my hope. UCLA has a very interesting schedule in 2026, one that sets itself up for success, but also one where there's sneaky matchups. Week 1 in 26, UCLA Cal. UCLA Cal in Berkeley. Two teams with two new coaches. Cal coming with the coordinator. That's a sneaky great game. It might not be ranked. It might not be, highly coveted by the networks. That's one where the winner gets a springboard over the next few weeks. UCLA wins that. They get San Diego State, fairly competitive team in the Mountain West, and beat UCLA last time. They're moving to the Pac-12. San Diego State wants a big-time win. If the Bruins can hold down the Aztecs, all of a sudden they play Nevada in week 3. And I think UCLA should handle Nevada. I can't say that after 2 Mountain West losses in 2025, but I forget who's really bouncing the Pac-12 other than San Diego State and Gonzaga and everything. It's so hard to keep track of. But if UCLA beats Cal, San Diego State, Nevada, that's 3-0. Their Big Ten schedule at Maryland, that's reasonable. Travel crazy, but reasonable. At Michigan, now I think they got it right with Kyle Whittingham, but maybe year 1, that's not the case. You've got at Minnesota, arguably a toss-up, you never know. You have at Oregon, but that's Oregon with 2 new coordinators, despite the return of Dante Moore, but I can't be stupid enough to say they're going to go in at Eugene year 1. They host Illinois, Michigan State, Purdue, USC, and Wisconsin. So that's 7 home games. Their non-conference game is at home, and most of their travel is manageable besides Maryland. That's a schedule I think that's built up for success. Can I say they're going to go 10-2, 9-3, make a playoff? No, I'm not going to say that. You got to prove it. But that is a schedule that's designed for some success. The only question is where they're going to play. I think it's leaning Rose Bowl, at least for 26. How the litigation, the lawsuits go out. It's all sorts of craziness. But for Chesney, he just needs a bowl. They just need something. We talk about how there's so many bowls nowadays. UCLA is begging to play in a bowl game right now, and you'll get so much more momentum with high school recruits, transfers, and if there's just a buzz in the home stadium, because come on, Seyko, everybody who's watching this has seen the pictures of the Rose Bowl, and it's a joke. It's going to tell a lot about this fan base, how many people show up to that first game against San Diego State in blue and gold. If we're hyped and ready to go, how much buzz is there going to be in either Inglewood or in Pasadena? And will there be people showing up? If it is, the recruits will notice, the country will notice, and social media will notice. And if that happens, that's a success for UCLA already, in addition to whatever wins and losses. The Bruins have brought in 42 transfers thus far, according to this recording. When we're recording it, JMU guys coming over to have the same system, same offensive and defensive coordinators. You have guys who have kind of not played early in their careers, but have good star recruitings, whether that's going to lead to success or not. And the guys who had some good roles in playoff caliber teams. I think he's really addressed a lot of the issues. UCLA, horrible at protecting Nico, one of the worst D-lines in the country in 25 sacks and tackles for loss, last in the FBS. He's addressed a lot of weaknesses. So there is a lot of excitement where it's UCLA basketball set right now, Seyko, and we're all talking about football. That says a lot about what it's like in Westwood.
I mean, that's how it should be. I mean, there's a lot of interest with Penn State football in the offseason. So I think that's a good sign for Locked On, not only Locked On UCLA, but just UCLA football overall, is that there is buzz. That's the key word that you said, buzz. Penn State has it with Matt Campbell that, oh, it's a different approach. You are trying something new. You couldn't get to where you wanted to with James Franklin. You get somebody that has proof that, hey, if you give him some more resources, what can he do? And there's interest. UCLA did not make a boring hire. UCLA did not make a questionable hire. The consensus across the board is this guy has potential. This guy has upside.
They had the longest opening. They had the longest opening, Seyko, and they got their guy. Now, if Penn State got him, I wonder where they would have pivoted. They would have gone towards, I think, San Diego State's head coach.
You're welcome. I guess in a sense, Penn State let this happen.
They did. UCLA let Penn State's opening kind of happen. Obviously, Northwestern was a bigger kicker.
This is true. So thank you.
Thank you to both schools.
It was kind of a mutual
thing.
Yes. I was going to say this was an even exchange. This was a fair trade at the end of the day. UCLA set the wheels in motion for James Franklin to get fired, to get Matt Campbell. And then in the process, UCLA, okay, we just got to get Bob Chesney. We'll get Bob Chesney. Let's keep this coaching search going and not waver. And you get Bob Chesney because you actually beat Penn State to set that, set the dominoes falling in that order. So crazy how a school in Pennsylvania and UCLA all the way on the West Coast have all this overlap in the offseason and how somehow have impacted one another going into the 2026 season, which I just think is ironic, but it's interesting in this day and age of college football, just how nationalized it is. And I think that's a good stopping point, and we can certainly pick up this conversation more as we get closer to the 2026 season. Hey, the 25 season just finished up with Indiana as a national champion. So there's nothing but optimism on both Penn State and UCLA side that they can start to get closer to both of their goals. That's going to do it for this Locked On crossover. He is Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer of Locked On UCLA. My name is Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you so much for joining us on this crossover episode and making the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcasting network out there. Zach, appreciate the time. Great to connect with you, and hopefully we can do this again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Seyko. Go Bruins, and maybe the Nittany Lions could have some success. They don't play each other this year. Thanks for letting us upset you, though.